Now, a lot of people cynically joke that BA First Class is the world's best business class, suggesting that it's not quite up to par with other first class offerings, and that it's not a big enough step up from business class. But today I get to find out how fair and how true are those comments as I fly BA First Class for the very first time. Let's get going. After staying at the Heathrow Airport Sofitel the night before, we were really looking forward to getting going for this one. This was to be our first class flight with any airline, so although we don't have a direct point of comparison with other first class flights other than what we've seen here on YouTube, we have done quite a bit of business class flying, particularly with BA and its one-world partners like Qatar, so we're really keen to find out whether or not it did feel like a big step up from business. Our flight today is 6 hours from London Heathrow down to Bahrain, so that does mean departing from Terminal 3 at Heathrow, and thankfully you can get a free transfer via the Heathrow Express or the Elizabeth line between terminals at Heathrow, so we're able to get over from T5 to T3 very easily. The downside for us departing from Terminal 3 rather than Terminal 5 means no Concorde lounge for us. However, because we're going from Terminal 3, we actually have access to 3 different One World First Class lounges. Now, we would have access to these anyway due to airline status, but there is one thing that's unique to travelling first class at T3 that I hadn't really seen before online, so I was really keen to see what it's actually like. And that's the Concorde dining room that's based in the BA lounge. But once we made it through the first class check-in and priority security, we decided to start things off in the worst of the 3 lounges available to us, and that's the American Airlines First Class Lounge. Immediately through the doors, a selection of pick and mix suites and also some free pour Moet champagne. Elsewhere in the lounge there's also plenty of other drinks to help yourself to, as well as a small buffet area with some limited food options. But we decided to start things off with some breakfast in the a la carte dining area. There's a small seating area to the side of the lounge for this, and we seem to be the only ones actually taking advantage of this morning. There were some decent options available. Kelly went for the smashed avocado and I decided to get the American pancakes. We were also served some juice as well as a coffee, but the coffee did just come straight from the machine. Wasn't anything fancy, but did give some much needed caffeine this morning. The food took a little while to arrive, which was reassuring because it made us think they were cooking it all fresh, but the quality, at least for mine, wasn't the greatest. The pancakes were pretty good, but not so much the bacon. It was just pure fat and it was all pretty soft. And once we finished eating, we decided to make our way over to the Cafe Pacific Lounge, which is a much nicer space to spend some time. In fact, if you're not flying first class, but you do have One World Emerald status, this is definitely the lounge you want to come to. The lounge gets loads of natural light, it's really nicely decorated, and there's plenty of seating options available, including a number of seats that look out towards the tarmac, and offer some great takeoff views. Elsewhere in the lounge there were magazines to grab. There was also a small buffet section with some nice options to eat. Nothing too extensive on the buffet side of things though, because it is mainly an a la carte dining lounge. I had a glance at the a la carte menu here and I was a bit gutted that we didn't just come straight here, to be honest. It definitely looked like a better one than the American Airlines lounge was going to offer us. But at least that's a lesson learned for next time. There was plenty of free pour champagne and spirits available, and we helped ourselves some Laurent Perrier. The first of many glasses of champagne on our journey today, including some quite expensive ones that will be served up by BA later on. Overall, the cafe lounge is a really nice setting to spend some time, and we spent a nice couple of hours here. If we weren't travelling in first class and therefore didn't have access to the Concorde dining room, we probably would have just remained here and had the a la carte dining for our lunch. But there was no way we were going to miss out on checking out the Concorde dining room and seeing what that's like. So we left the cafe lounge and made our way over. All the One World lounges are located really close to each other in Terminal 3, so it's a very short walk over to the BA First Lounge. The main lounge itself is a nice space. It's very similar to what you get in the business class lounge, although it's a lot quieter and there are a few small upgrades to the experience here or there. Primarily a couple of small differences in the food and some free pour champagne. When we checked into the lounge, they gave us a ticket for our Concorde dining. The Concorde dining room is right at the back of the lounge, and we made our way over there now. The dining room's a relatively small space, as BA only operates a couple of first class flights per day. We were seated at a table over at the corner of the room. Unfortunately, this didn't offer the best views out the window, as those tables were already taken. We were each offered and accepted a glass of champagne, and this is a 2006 Pommery champagne that retails for about £200 per bottle. And BA served this in a Pommery glass that matches the bottle. It was very nice, but I've got to say I maybe don't have the most sophisticated palate when it comes to these things, because I couldn't tell you why this costs 4 times as much as the Laurent Perrier we had earlier. We were handed food menus and had a look through. We didn't want to go too crazy here. We knew we'd be having food on the flight and we wanted to save a bit of space for that. I thought it'd be a bit of a shame to be too full to enjoy the first class dining on the flight. We brought some bread with butter and oil, and then I started things off with a Caesar salad, whilst Kelly opted for the soup. Both tasty and light meals, although nothing particularly spectacular. We then both opted for the Concorde burger. Again, tasty but nothing spectacular. I did appreciate that the portion size wasn't too crazy though. It was a good sized burger and just a few chips. Enough to fill us up without getting too stuffed. And we did decide to just leave it at that rather than getting dessert. Instead, we opted to relocate to one of the seats near the windows and spend the remaining time drinking some more champagne and watching the planes take off. But at this point we'd already been at the airport lounge hopping for a few hours, so it wasn't too long before it was time to go board the flight. And we were really excited leaving the lounge, looking forward to getting on board and seeing what it was going to be like. When we did make it over to the gate, we were actually told it was due to be a really quiet flight today. In fact, they said it was only 25% full, and that's across all cabins. So even if we'd been flying economy today, chances are we'd have had a pretty good amount of space. There was quite a bit of a wait around at the gate, but eventually they did open the doors and it was time to board, starting with Group 1, which was ourselves. We received a warm welcome on board and we were escorted over to our seats. We'd opted for 1K and 2K today. We had thought about the middle seats, which are good for couples to be able to talk a bit easier, but we were both quite keen for a window view. I threw my bag up into the storage locker along with the bedding and got myself seated. First impressions that the seat was very comfortable and had so much space, and it felt like a lot more space than you get in business. But let's take a closer look at some of the main features of the seat. Over to my left was a good sized storage locker with plenty of space for a bag, shoes and a hanger to put a jacket on. And then over to my right we have the majority of the in-seat controls. And this series of buttons and dials controls the recline of the seat. It also controls the lights. There's also a button to control the window shades and a USB port, as well as the port to plug in the included headphones. Waiting for me at my footrest were the headphones, and also a blanket. This was only a 6-hour afternoon flight, and although we'd be arriving quite late, I wasn't planning to sleep, although I will try out the bed mode later on. I will also try out those headphones with a film later as well. But that would have to wait, as the in-flight entertainment screen does have to be stowed for takeoff, and for landing. There's a huge amount of legroom in the seat. For reference, I'm 6 foot, and when sat fully upright my feet could barely reach the footrest in its upright position. However, this can be lowered and pulled forward to make it easier to access. And it can also be used as a seat for a second passenger to do some buddy dining, which we'll be trying out later. Speaking of which, there's a very large and sturdy tray table that comes out from here, once I've figured it out. And there's plenty of space on this table to allow for 2 people to eat together. At this point though, I noticed the seat was seriously lacking in storage, other than the one cupboard that I was able to use that you could store a bag or store your shoes. There really weren't any other storage cubbies, so there's nowhere to put things like a tablet or maybe personal earphones that weren't in use. And above the seat, although there were individual reading lights, there weren't any individual air vents. Those were the main initial shortcomings of the suite that I could notice, in addition to the fact that there's no door, although you still do get a good level of privacy. In addition to the USB charger, there's also a power outlet by your seat, no USB-C charging though, and this was the only other storage I could find, this little area where you could store documents like the menu. And then hidden behind this panel, you also had the controller for the in-flight entertainment, although when the screen's folded out, I did find it was close enough to just use the touchscreen. Shortly after I got settled in the seat, the really friendly cabin crew came around and offered champagne. She also brought an amenity kit, and also asked if I wanted some pyjamas, which I of course accepted. Pyjamas and slippers are provided by Temperley, and of course we'll be trying both out once we get up in the air. The champagne on offer was a 2014 Charles Hyde stick that retails at around £200, so really getting through the £200 bottle of champagne today, and I much preferred this one to the one from the lounge. Although I'm sure it didn't hurt that I had a few glasses by now, and I was pretty excited to be in this setting. Myself and Kelly were each provided with separate Temperley amenity kits, which are filled with Elemis products that I'll have a look at later. And Kelly then decided to come join me in the seat for a pre-departure beverage, as well as enjoying a few nibbles that the cabin crew had brought over. So yeah, so far the pre-departure service was definitely feeling a step above business, especially when comparing to BA business class. We were also handed out menus for today's flight. BA offers dine on demand in first class, so you can eat whenever you want, and although it wasn't that long since I'd eaten in the lounge, I still tend to prefer to eat as soon as I'm up in the air, and I knew I'd then be able to have a lighter meal later on. There's also a really good drinks menu here, and again this takes it a real step above business class for BA, with a good selection of some premium champagnes and spirits. I was particularly looking forward to trying out some Johnny Walker Blue Label once we get in the sky, as that's always been a bit out of my price range. Hot towels were handed out, and I was also offered a second glass of champagne just as we started to push back, and the safety demo was then played.
I must confess a sentiment of the most tender nature.
Helped along by the low passenger load on the flight, boarding didn't take too long to complete, so we were able to push back for an on-time departure. As mentioned earlier, the IFE has to be stowed for takeoff and landing, so once the safety demo had been played, this had to be tucked away again, unfortunately. Although, to be honest, looking out the window is my main entertainment for takeoff anyway. And it's always nice when you get more than one window to look out of. As I mentioned before though, there is a real lack of storage in this seat, and I didn't really know where to put everything for takeoff, so I just ended up sliding it behind this side table, but thankfully it all seemed to be fine actually, just tucked away there. I noticed as well during the taxi that the seat next to me was making this really loud rattling noise, which felt like another sign of the seat just showing its age a little bit again. As we make our way to the runway and go to take off, let me talk a little bit about the cost of this flight, because I feel like I've got a great deal. Now, there's absolutely no way that I could afford to do cash for this, so of course I used Avios. We needed to get over to the Middle East, and I'd noticed from looking on the BA Reward Flight Finder that there always seems to be decent availability for first class to Bahrain. It seemed to be one of the easier flights to find availability for. So that ended up being the main reason we decided to go here. Now thankfully we did enjoy our time in Bahrain, and it is well worth a visit in its own right, but if I'm being completely honest, we wouldn't have gone there if it wasn't for the fact that we could find that first class availability. So how many points and how much cash should it cost? Well, there's a weird quirk with BA pricing at the moment in that the first class flights actually cost less points than their business class. However, the cash that you pay in taxes and fees is more. For first class it was just 68,000 Avios per person, plus about £473 in taxes and charges per person. But we actually had an expiring Amex 2-for-1 voucher that we didn't have any other use for, so we decided to use this, meaning it was only 34,000 Avios each, whereas the cash price at time of booking was £4,700 each. So I think we got a decent deal there. Once up in the air, I made myself comfortable, kicked off my shoes and put them away in that little storage locker. And I decided to give the slippers a try. I never usually find slippers that fit me on these flights or in hotels, but these ones fit just fine. Nice to have something to slip on when going to the bathrooms. I then was able to make use of the dial next to me to get the seat reclined into a more comfortable position, although having said that, the upright position is perfectly comfortable as well. And then once I reclined back, I decided to also pull forward that footrest, put my feet up and decided to give the in-flight entertainment a look. There's a really good selection of films to choose from, as well as some TV box sets, and BA also provides free Wi-Fi to first class passengers. I did try this out and it worked okay. It was fine for like social media and messaging, but not quite fast enough that I would have been able to use it for streaming, and it was a bit reliable at times. It wasn't available with full coverage for the entire flight. And whilst I was having a look through, the cabin crew came round to offer me a drink, and I decided to kick things off with a glass of Johnny Walker Blue Label. Again, similar to the champagne I've been drinking today, a bottle of this also goes for about £200, so I was doing pretty well to cover the cost of my taxes and charges for this flight just on the booze alone. And I really enjoyed just drinking this, sitting back and looking out the window. But of course, with all the booze, it was time to make a quick trip to the loo. At first glance, just a pretty standard, small airplane bathroom. There were a few nice touches in here though. There was Elemis soap, as well as some hand lotion, and I also really liked that they did just have, rather than paper towels, there were proper individual hand towels to use as well, which was a nice little premium touch there. And then back at my seat, I cracked open the Meridian noise cancelling headphones, and I started to watch a film. I found the headphones pretty comfortable. I don't tend to like a lot of airplane earphones, but they're absolutely fine for the full length of the film, and they did a decent job of noise cancellation, again a lot better than what's provided in business class with BA. And whilst I was starting to watch this, I decided to make things a little bit cosy by just closing that blind and turning on the lamp. And not long into my film, it was soon time for the dinner service for myself. The table was laid out nicely with all the first class cutlery, and the cabin crew laid a napkin on my lap. I was provided a small and tasty amuse-bouche, as well as my cocktail selection of choice for my meal, which was the Beach Bounds to get me in that holiday mood. I was provided some really good bread and butter, and then the starter arrived. I went for the Wagyu Carpaccio. It was all presented really nicely, and it tasted absolutely delicious. Really didn't take me long to get through. I was really enjoying it, and I made sure to clear my plate. And even from that first course, the amuse-bouche and the drink so far, again the catering just felt like such a significant step up from BA Business Class. For my main course I opted for the lamb, which came with some nice veggies and carbs on the side. Everything was really nice. The lamb was juicy and tender, it had a really nice sauce. comfortably one of the best meals I've ever had on a plane, and easily the best BA meal I've ever had on a plane. I mentioned at the start of the video a lot of people compare BA First Class to the world's best business class. For me, the best business class catering that I've had is Qatar. And is this meal better than Qatar business class? I do think it is, but to be honest, not by a huge stretch. I do think the food in Qatar business class is absolutely brilliant, as was this. And the fact that there's not much difference between the two, that's not a knock on BA First Class as far as I'm concerned. That's just testament to how good the business class offering is with Qatar. And the food here I do think is a very significant step above what you get with BA in business class. As I waited for dessert and as the sun started to set outside, I decided to try one of the whiskey cocktails, which was really great. As you can see from my happy face here. At this point I realised I'd really not been paying any attention to the film I'd put on. I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in this. I'd just been enjoying the food, enjoying the views out the window, and enjoying the drinks. My dessert arrived and it was a pretty small plate of ice cream. Definitely the weakest part of the meal, but I was getting pretty full by this point, so I wasn't too mad about it. And I was soon going to follow that up with the cheese course anyway, so I'll forgive them the tiny dessert. Really nice cheese course, which is a perfect way to finish off the meal and left me feeling absolutely stuffed. And once everything had been cleared away, I decided to shift over to my other seat, or the footrest, so that I could sit and enjoy the rest of the sunset with my drink. At this point I was on to my second Johnny Walker Blue Label. Gotta be honest, pretty buzzed at this point. Right, let's finally crack open some amenity kit and see what we've got in here. The kit comes in a really nice temple-y bag, and there's a whole load of Elemis goodies inside. There's quite a silky eye mask, your standard in-flight socks, a deodorant, shaving gel, eye cream, exfoliant, moisturiser and lip balm. There's also earplugs, a toothbrush and toothpaste, a comb and a BA First pen. It's not a fancy pen or anything, just a pretty standard ballpoint, but it does say First on it, so of course that makes it very premium. The women's kit comes in a different bag, also from Temple, but it's got a different pattern, different fabric and different contents. It's mostly the same type of stuff and just the women's version of it, but there are a few little differences. For example, they get a mirror rather than a comb, and instead of the shaving gel they get a facial mist. I wish they had that in the men's kit too. I quite like that on a flight, it's really refreshing. But anyway, it's time to go trying the PJs. Again, there's a different style for men and women, and these are also from Temple. They are really comfortable, but I'm not the biggest fan of the style for men. To try them out properly, I decided to get my seat flat into bed mode, and as soon as the crew saw me doing this, they immediately came over to offer to set up the bed for me, which they did. It's really good quality bedding, and the bed itself is really comfy when it's set up. You know, this is where you have one of the biggest differentiators from business class. You really do have a lot more space, and it's great to not have to put your foot in a small narrow cubby. Plenty of space for my legs and feet here, and a nice big comfy pillow too. I do think the bed overall could benefit from being slightly wider, but overall I managed to get a really nice rest for about half an hour or so, and I could definitely see myself getting a great sleep on a nighttime flight. When I got up I was in the mood for my second meal, and Kelly was just about ready for her first. So we decided to try out another unique feature of first class, which is the buddy dining. You know, so often with both business class and first class these days there's a real push to make things more and more private. And that's fantastic if you're travelling solo, and I do really enjoy it myself. But when you're travelling with someone else and you really want to share the experience, with a lot of products that can be really difficult to do. This plane was actually still using the old style of BA business class, which has the yin-yang seating layouts. And as much as the new club suite is, you know, objectively a better seat in so many ways, we've often had a lot more fun on an old style Club World flight because we're actually able to talk, have a good meal together, because it is a lot more difficult to share the experience with those new suites. So I really enjoyed being able to have a meal together on this flight today. And it was another really good meal, and we were able to finish it off with sharing a dessert and washing it down with some more lovely champagne and whiskey. And there wasn't a huge amount of time left in the flight after that, so I soon made my way back to my seats, got myself comfy, watched a bit of a TV show, and just reflected on the overall experience. It had been an absolutely terrific flight. I think we got incredible value for money for what we spent on this with the Avios and the taxes and charges. And every element did feel like a massive step up from what you get in BA business class. From the ground experience, the service from the crew, the quality of the food and the drink. The seat itself is probably the one area that was lacking the most compared to business class, because obviously the club suite is a really good seat. But for its few shortcomings and for its slight age, it was still an incredibly comfortable seat. And the extra space that you get compared with business class was actually a lot more than I was expecting. I don't think the video quite does that justice. BA have announced a new first class seat due to start getting rolled out next year. We'll see how long it actually takes to get rolled out. But that one does seem to have some big improvements in terms of privacy as well, along with other features that maybe bring it up to speed with other international first classes, even if it doesn't surpass them. As I mentioned at the start, I don't really have that direct point of comparison for other international first class offerings, but from what I've seen online, I can understand why it gets a bit of a bad rap. It certainly doesn't have the fancy seats of the likes of Emirates or Etihad, and as much as the dining on here was a big step up from BA's business class, it does seem like the offerings on those other airlines' first class is just a step above what we received. But despite that, I do think the labelling of it as the world's best business class is a bit unfair. To me, this truly did feel like a first class offering, and was a big step up on not just BA's business class but on a lot of other international business class as well. Admittedly, some airlines do have business class food offerings that are of a similar calibre, and there's plenty that offer more privacy by having a closed door and in a closed suite, though I should caveat that some versions of the BA first class seat do actually have doors now. But you're not going to find a business class seat that has this amount of space. Being able to do things like the buddy dining, the calibre of drinks on offer, and the really great service we received, all just made it really stand out to me despite some shortcomings. Really keen to hear your thoughts on this. Do you consider BA first class to be a true first class? Or are there actually any business class offerings that you prefer? And if you want to see how this compares to my experience of flying in BA first class in the club suite, then you should go ahead and watch this video next. Thanks for watching.